Just about 7 minutes after the flight took off, smoke started emerging from the cargo hold. At the same time, alarms began ringing in the cockpit. Before the pilots could fully understand the situation, thick smoke began filling the cockpit. Smoke started spreading rapidly throughout the cabin. Witnessing this, the pilot declared an emergency and decided to return the plane to the airport. The plane successfully landed back at the airport, but what followed was beyond anyone's imagination. After landing, the plane didn't stop for nearly 3 minutes. Meanwhile, alarms at the airport had already been triggered. Though the plane eventually stopped on the runway, its doors wouldn't open. Both engines were still running at full speed, and they showed no signs of stopping. It seemed as though the fate of all 301 passengers on board was sealed. Gradually, the sounds of crying and screaming from inside the cabin faded away. Then suddenly, there was a massive explosion in the plane. In an instant, all 301 passengers were engulfed in a raging fire. The passengers who were on their way to perform religious duties in Mecca never reached their destination. How did smoke start emerging from the cargo hold just 7 minutes after takeoff? Why couldn't the plane doors be opened even after a successful emergency landing? And why weren't all 301 passengers saved? What caused the explosion inside the plane? Why couldn't this disaster be prevented? Find out the full story in today's video. August 19th, 1980. Saudi Arabian Airlines Flight 163 was scheduled to fly from Karachi's Quaid-e-Azam International Airport in Pakistan, making a stop at Riyadh International Airport in Saudi Arabia before heading to its final destination, Jeddah's Kandahar International Airport. The plane carried 301 people, including passengers and 14 crew members. The flight was commanded by 38-year-old Captain Muhammad Ali, who had 7,674 flight hours of experience and had joined Saudi Airlines in 1965. The first officer, 26-year-old Sami Abdullah Hasnain, had 10,615 flight hours of experience, though his poor performance during training had led to his expulsion from flying school. Additionally, 42-year-old flight engineer Bradley Curtis was on board with 650 flight hours of experience. At 6:32 p.m., Saudi Arabian Airlines Flight 163 took off from Karachi. The weather was clear, and the runway was visible even in the dark. After a 30-minute flight, the plane reached Riyadh International Airport at 7:06 p.m. for refueling, where it stayed for approximately 2 hours. After refueling and allowing some passengers to disembark, the plane took off again at 9:08 p.m. Just 7 minutes after takeoff, cabin crew noticed smoke coming from the cargo area. Simultaneously, alarms started ringing in the cockpit. Unfortunately, the cabin crew wasted 4 minutes trying to confirm the situation before informing the pilots. By then, the smoke had spread rapidly. The flight engineer confirmed the situation to the captain, who immediately declared an emergency and informed Air Traffic Control, ATC, that the plane was returning to Riyadh due to a fire on board. As the plane approached the airport, its number 2 engine jammed because the cables operating it had burned. The captain shut down the engine and managed to land the plane back at Riyadh Airport at 9:36 p.m. However, after landing, the plane couldn't stop on the runway and continued taxiing for several minutes. Smoke and fire inside the cabin made it nearly impossible to breathe. Despite the pilot's best efforts, the situation deteriorated rapidly. The engines were still running, preventing rescue teams from opening the plane's doors. Tragically, all 301 passengers inside had already lost consciousness or passed away due to the smoke and lack of oxygen. After nearly 30 minutes, rescuers managed to open a door on the left side of the plane. But just 3 minutes later, a massive explosion engulfed the aircraft in flames, leaving no survivors. What caused this disaster? Investigators determined that the fire originated in the rear cargo section. They found evidence suggesting that a passenger had used a portable stove to heat water for tea. In 1980, aviation regulations were not as strict, and passengers were allowed to carry such items on board. The fire spread rapidly in the pressurized cabin, and the crew's delayed response worsened the situation. Even after landing, the engines were not shut down immediately, and the cabin remained pressurized, making it impossible to open the doors. Most passengers lost consciousness at 25,000 feet due to the smoke, and many had already succumbed to the fire before the plane landed. This tragic accident highlighted critical safety failures and preventable errors. That's all for today's video. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If not, feel free to dislike it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more such stories.